At the end of a landmark Roman Catholic Church summit, Pope Francis has condemned priests found guilty of child sexual abuse, calling them tools of Satan. He said abuse reminded him of the ancient pagan practice of child sacrifice and that from now on, looking after victims would be the Church's priority. New guidelines to punish abusers have also been promised, but as our correspondent James Reynolds now reports, victims are still waiting for detailed and practical steps.
For 4 days, Catholic bishops from across the world heard the testimony of victims abused by priests. Now, at the end of their conference, the Pope called on the entire Church not to blame others. Instead, he said it should take action and make victims the priority.
If in the Church there should emerge even a single case of abuse, which already in itself represents an atrocity, that case will be faced with the utmost seriousness. Indeed, in people's justified anger, the Church sees the reflection of the wrath of God, betrayed and insulted by these deceitful consecrated persons.
Francis said that his bishops would now review and strengthen their guidelines. Bishops promised to take steps on their return home.
A mission stretches before us. A mission demanding not just words, but real, concrete action. We will do all we can to bring justice and healing to survivors of abuse. We will listen to them, believe them, walk with them. We will ensure that those who have been abused, who have abused, are never again able to offend. We will call to account those who have concealed abuse.
No más abusos! No! But survivors of abuse marching this week in Rome demand more than vague general commitments they've heard many times before. They want the Church to take practical steps, and they plan to hold the Pope to his promises. James Reynolds, BBC News, Rome.
Well, while the Vatican concludes its summit, survivors of abuse at the hands of clergy members have been reacting. They fear that despite the Church's promises, the cycle of abuse will continue. Among them is Sean Doherty, who was abused as a child by a priest in the US state of Pennsylvania.
Nothing that I heard from the Pope today sounded historic. So unless we do things radically different, radical changes, full transparency, full accountability for everyone in clergy, from the top all the way down and back up again, it will be historic again, because history has a habit of repeating itself.
Pope Francis closed a historic 4-day summit on clergy sex abuse within the Catholic Church by promising justice for all of the victims and calling priests who abuse children, quote, tools of Satan. However, the Pope did not offer any concrete steps to actually address the crisis.
Consecrated persons chosen by God to guide souls to salvation let themselves be dominated by their human frailty or sickness and thus become tools of Satan. In abuse, we see that the hand of evil does not spare even the innocence of children.
CNN's Rosa Flores joins me now from Rome. So, Rosa, the Vatican received a lot of criticism, during this summit from protesters who saw this as more talk than action. I mean, the language of, human frailties. So what are you hearing?
From talking to survivors, Fred, they're disappointed. They feel let down. They were hoping that history would be made during this unprecedented meeting. And instead, they feel it's history repeating itself. The Church, yet again, not holding itself accountable. So during that final speech that Pope Francis delivered, he did call for an all-out battle against abuse. But then he didn't deliver on actually what concrete steps needed to be taken to win that battle. It wasn't until after those remarks were made during a press conference that the moderator of the event listed the first steps that they plan to take. And that includes drafting a new law for the protection of children, a handbook on bishops' duties and creating a task force. But without specifics on how to hold bishops accountable, that list just didn't sit well with survivors. Take a listen.
Because that's where this problem and this evil lives. It's bishops and cardinals that cover up these crimes. If they're covering them up, or they're allowed to cover them up, or there's no way to find out if they're covering them up, then it doesn't matter what other law you make.
Survivors that I talked to say that they have faith in civil authorities who are conducting their own investigations in the United States, Chile, and other countries, Fred.
All right, Rosa Flores in Rome, thank you so much.